Imagine being the biggest pop star in your country, followed by millions on social media, selling out arenas everywhere you go, and even winning the local version of Dancing with the Stars. But then being overlooked for Eurovision despite being the overwhelming favourite in favour of a totally unknown electronic folk band with 2,000 Instagram followers. This is exactly what happened to Elvana, gjata in Albania. She has achieved basically everything that an Albanian pop star can achieve, but Eurovision is the one thing that still eludes her. This hasn't just happened once either, it's now happened twice. From accusations of inauthenticity to alleged involvement with the Albanian mafia, it's been a rollercoaster that hasn't led to the ending that she would hope for. Today, we're going to talk about why it panned out that way, who the electronic folk band that Alvana lost to actually are, and the rest of the traditional chaos and drama that unfolded around Festivali I Kenges, the Albanian national selection for Eurovision this year. Quickly before we start, make sure to like the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy it. You can find me and my editor Jay's socials in the description as well. You can also support us financially on Ko-fi or Patreon, as well as here on YouTube, of course. All the details are below. Now let's get into it. For those who aren't familiar, Albania has a unique reputation when it comes to Eurovision. Their national final is nothing if not unpredictable, and this guy winning last year just about proves that. He actually came back this year and he's kind of learned to sing in the last 12 months. Unfortunately, he was punished for learning to sing with a 12th placed finish. This year, it quickly became clear that there were only ever going to be two contenders to represent Albania at Eurovision. The first is the woman that we've already met. Elvana gjata returned after 5 years away with her song, Carnaval. Coming into the competition this year, I and many others assumed that Elvana would simply run away with it. Some even suggested that the competition would be rigged in her favour. Given some of the interesting results in Albania in the last few years, this didn't seem like an impossibility. Before a note was sung though, a cloud was hanging over Elvana's head in the form of legal troubles and accusations that have been hanging over her for some time now. While she has still been very successful commercially, Elvana has been associated with the Albanian mafia through her ex-fiancé. This involved his alleged use of Elvana's bank account to launder money. Much more seriously, she allegedly also had a role in trafficking young Albanian women to Dubai who were then forced to work as escorts. The Albanian authorities are no longer investigating this, with the justification being that crimes related to trafficking that took place in Dubai or elsewhere should be investigated in those places. I'm not here to pass judgment on whether they are true or not. We also don't know the circumstances of her relationship with her ex-fiancé or her breakup. I think it's important to mention that it is a common tactic of abusive men to take control of their partner's finances and then misuse their accounts. In this case, it's perfectly plausible that Alvana didn't have much of a say over whether money was laundered through her accounts or not. Given that her ex-fiancé is associated with organised crime, doesn't seem like a massive stretch that this would be something he would do. On the flip side, I think it's extremely suspicious that a company that Alvana owns 100% of suddenly declared a turnover in 2022 of more than 70 million euros. I don't doubt that she's earning a lot of money, but for context, there are only between 7 and 10 million Albanians in the world. For an Albanian language only singer, this level of turnover is totally implausible. The only explanation is it's being used to disguise something else. The waters have been muddied on this and the picture is really unclear. We are likely never going to have the full story of to what extent Alvana was or wasn't involved in these crimes. What we do know is this controversy was still hanging over her as she entered into the contest, and fans rapidly picked up on it. That said, it says a lot about her status in the Albanian music industry that despite all of that, it still felt like a bit of a runaway train for her to win this year. A glance at the list of other participants didn't present a single clear rival or anyone with even remotely the same stature. Free at that stage of any knowledge of the crimes she may or may not have had a part forgotten, and with an ultimately quite unfair perception of what the average quality level in this national final would be, I jumped straight on to the Elvana hype train. After her initial performance in the semi-finals of the show, I got very overexcited, declared she was way better than everyone else and should win easily. In the process, I blanked out several things that with retrospect should have been clear from the beginning. I do first want to highlight the good things though, and the reasons why I initially got excited. Carnaval is a really catchy, upbeat song performed by someone who nails it live vocally every single time. Had Elvana made it to Eurovision, she would have potentially been able to find a wide audience for this as well. That would have in turn brought home a very good result. It's clear that she can dance and sing at the same time, and while we'll look into some of the interesting choreo decisions in a moment, this is something that presumably would have been improved upon dramatically by the time she performed in Basel in May. Sadly though, as it is, we do have to talk about the staging and choreo as it was performed at the national final. This is one of the major things that Elvana and her team got wrong. It starts off without any major issues, with a possibly over-dramatic opening of Elvana descending from the ceiling, being followed up by this really cool shot of her and her dancers as the music kicks in. But after this, it just feels a little underwhelming. The dance break in a song like this should be the show-stopping moment, but instead it just falls short. There's not enough here to fully sell it. In addition to that, with Alvana and her dancers all dressed in black, they don't jump out against the dark backdrop of the stage. These strange choreo decisions extended to the whole performance. None more so than this bizarre human staircase into trustful combination that just looks so messy, as well as being totally out of step with the kind of polish and precision that a performance like this needs. I also really dislike the decision to have Elvana up rising on a platform away from her dancers and not doing anything. She's totally static and it doesn't match the energy of the song or the rest of the performance at all. A few things struck me listening to the song as well. Firstly, the chorus consists of an aerobics instructor style chanting of numbers in Spanish, accompanied by a dance routine. This means that Elvana Gjata is the spiritual child of Loco Boombox. There's nothing wrong with this, but it just doesn't really scream Albania to me. The musical inspiration here seems to be drawn more from football anthems than anything else. I wasn't the only one to think that, and it did end up being a significant factor, but we'll get onto that later. In addition, am I the only one who noticed that the chord progression and melody of this was kind of giving Mad World by Gary Jules? Worn out places, worn out faces. In all seriousness though, there is a clear argument that this song was really not breaking any new ground. And while there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, when you're doing something that plenty of other people have done before, the only option is to do it better than them. That means the bar is much higher, and unfortunately, a lot of people simply didn't feel that she had met it. This is much more difficult than doing something completely original, because if the audience has heard it 100 times before, why should they listen to your version of it? In addition to that, the precision and polish that I've mentioned is really difficult to deliver in this show. The Albanian national final took a big step forward this year in terms of song quality, production quality, and in terms of artistic direction. We have a lot to thank Elhaida Dani for, who came in as the artistic director of the show this year. She has dragged this show kicking and screaming into this century. But you can't do everything in 1 year, and I have to say it didn't really feel like they were ready for something like this yet. In spite of all of this was still the overwhelming favourite to win before the show. There's plenty of history rewriting going on now, but Dolphin Dane, who is one of only 2 Euro fans who I trust with numbers, the other one being Euro Bruno, gathered predictions together in order to generate a model. This gives us a sense of what the prevailing wisdom was among Euro fans before the show. That model gave Elvana a 93.5% chance of winning. Accordingly, only one song was even able to break 1% in terms of how much of a chance it had of winning. With a model chance of 4.9% to win the show, you had Shkodra Elektronike with their song Zjerm. While on one hand you have Albania's biggest star, on the other hand you have Shkodra Elektronika, an Italy-based electronic/folk duo, completely unheard of before this show, with 2,000 Instagram followers and a dream. The name of the band comes from the fact that both of the members are from the city of Shkodra. I presume I don't have to explain the electronica bit. They didn't actually grow up in that city though, but rather in Italy, as I mentioned. And much of the inspiration in their music comes from that experience. That's reflected in the lyrics of this song too, and in the way they staged it at the show. On one hand, you have the opening verse sung by Beatrice. I'll let you guess which one of these two people is Beatrice, which is full of optimism, speaking of a world without soldiers where petrol smells like lilac and where arrogance and anger don't exist. On the other hand, you have Kola's verse. This is performed in a low growling voice and in a spoken word form. It contains lines about stars we can't see because we stepped on them and searching for a light in a darkness that refuses to shine. I don't think it's a coincidence either that Beatrice is dressed in red and vibrant colours and dances through the chorus, while Kola is dressed in all black and standing absolutely still. That said, part of that might be because poor Kola looked absolutely terrified for the duration of his performance. Unfortunately for Alvana, what Shkodra Elektronika had brought to the competition was something that stood in absolutely perfect asymmetry with Carnaval. These two were like chalk and cheese, both on the influences that they drew from and the effect that it had on the audience. When the other option is a boilerplate girl bop that's drawing on influences and references from far beyond Albania's borders, something as intertwined with Albanians' identities, both musically and lyrically, felt particularly powerful. Sometimes it's external factors like these that give something even more impact than it would already have. I genuinely think that part of the reason why Zjerm was so effective was that it had Carnaval there to magnify it. It specifically drew attention to everything that was wrong with Carnaval and everything that was so right about Zjerm. Even then, I actually still thought Elvana was going to win. The two contenders finished just a few points apart in the jury vote, and they absolutely deserved the fact that they were well clear of everyone else. The public vote this year in Albania was split into two parts, and the first half of that was a vote from the diaspora. In reality, this was hijacked by a bunch of Eurofans with Google accounts. In any case, whether it was Eurofans or diaspora Albanians voting here, they broke heavily for Elvana. At this stage, to be honest, it looked like there was only going to be one winner. But in one last twist of fate, the domestic Albanian public vote broke heavily in favour of Shkodra Elektronika, and they won by just a few points. This is the second time that Elvana Gjata has failed to make it to Eurovision when she's tried, and there is a bitter symmetry between now and 2019 when she had her first attempt. In 2019, she didn't win the competition because a single juror put her dead last in their ranking. They used the justification that, in their words, Elvana's song was gypsy music that had nothing in common with Albanian culture. This time, at least anecdotally, Albanians seem to have been turned off by the fact that Carnival drew on influences from other countries. This time, though, it was the Albanian public, rather than a single juror with an axe to grind, that stopped her from making it to Eurovision. There is a bitter mirror image here for Elvana. Twice an overwhelming favourite and twice succumbing to an underdog, for strikingly similar reasons, at least on the face of it. The big difference is, in 2019, that prejudice from that juror, as well as being blatantly discriminatory, was completely ridiculous. Elvana's song from that year clearly taps into Albanian musical tradition in a way that Carnival doesn't. It really is a bitter twist of irony that this year Elvana brought a song to this competition that was able to have the same criticism leveled at it, but this time totally legitimately. One thing that's to her credit is she did take the result well, and she did wish Shkodra Elektronika all the best at Eurovision. All that leaves is to talk about their actual chance at the contest. But first, some brief comic relief in the form of this guy. That is Ardit Shuni. This year, he delivered what I can only describe as "We have Matt Black at home." In all seriousness though, his song Amane was actually pretty good, and I did enjoy it, but that isn't why he's being brought up here. Having already previously picked a fight with the Albanian broadcaster in 2022 when he accused them of owing him money, he returned this year to be one of the sorest losers in a national final that I have seen in years. After the result, he made his support for Alvana clear by uploading this story to Instagram. This was after he had already inexplicably picked a fight with a bunch of random Euro fans on Twitter earlier in the week. He's since deleted the tweets, and I have not been able to find screenshots, or if I have, they'll appear on screen now, but we have at the very least found some of the replies. If you're going to act like this, you have to be really, really good to back it up. Like I said, while I did enjoy his song, he is absolutely not good enough to be doing this. Seriously, how are you turning around and behaving this cocky when you got 2 points from the public vote? 2! In any case, Albania has managed to get to the end of this show with a Eurovision entry, and we should look a little more into their chances at the contest. It is very early days still, and we've only heard 2 of the 38 songs, but I do think there are a few reasons to be optimistic here, as well as a couple of risks. Zjerm is a really unique and captivating song that really nicely bridges the gap between traditional Albanian sounds and modern electronic ones. This is going to help people engage with it a bit more easily than if it only relied on folk elements. It also has a dramatic flair and an ability to be staged that most successful Eurovision entries really need. The live performance is strong as well. I want to especially highlight Beatrice here because her voice is absolutely stunning. And the spoken word section provides a really interesting counterpoint to that as well. I also think the dance that goes with the post-chorus instrumental is really, really effective. I would love to see them do this in a bigger way on the Eurovision stage by backing up Beatrice's movements with 3 or 4 dancers behind her. There are a couple of things that need work though, and these mostly revolve around Kola's stage performance. The poor guy looks like he's absolutely shitting himself with nerves. I would probably feel the exact same in his position, but the route to success for this song at Eurovision is by making him as scary and foreboding as possible. You can't do that if he's clearly terrified. He has the look, he just needs to be able to sell it. Luckily, I think the solution to this is probably not too complex. Shkodra Elektronika need to perform this song in public in front of audiences as much as possible, at pre-parties, on TV, doesn't matter where. That'll solve some of the issues, and the additional rehearsal time between now and May is bound to help a lot too. If he's able to improve his presence on stage, the chances for this song will improve significantly, but I think that even as it is now, we are already looking at something that's going to qualify comfortably. This will resonate with Albanians across Europe, and it will pick up credit elsewhere too for the fact that it's going to be completely different to anything else in its semi-final. Unless we see another country in the Balkans produce something similar, there's not going to be anything that sounds like this. Based on the direction of the other national selections in the Balkans this year, it seems that Albania is going to be on this territory alone. It's a strong song and it's performed memorably that it's going to see it through to the final, and it won't be too much of a problem. That final performance though is where I start to get a little more unsure about where it's going to end up. On one hand, I have my conventional logic that says that this should finish somewhere down the bottom of the final. But then I think about 2023 and Duya, which I didn't even think would qualify, finishing 10th with the public. To be honest, I'd be kind of surprised if Zjerm did worse than that. Given that the jury result will probably be better as well, I think somewhere in the high teens is where this is going to end up. You could even see it sneak into the top 10. Overall though, I think Albanians should be really proud of this entry. It's a brave thing to resist the allure of a star as big as Elvana gjata and take a risk on a totally unknown option. But I really think it's going to pay off, and I'm so glad that Albania has made this choice. With that, it's time to wrap up for today. This video, much like my previous one about Montenegro, which you might want to go and watch next, is a bit of a new style for me. So I am keen to hear what you think about it. I did enjoy reviewing things in groups of 3 last year, but I honestly prefer being able to deep dive a bit more like this, give you a bit more context, and really get into some of the hidden storylines that you might otherwise have missed. As a result, I'm leaning more towards covering less shows in more depth this year. I will try to cover everything, but it's not going to be as high a priority this time around. Instead, my priority will be giving the best possible coverage I can give on a smaller number of things and trying to tell deeper, more interesting stories for you guys. For now though, you can expect another video in 7 days. If you're watching this more than 7 days after the release, then you can go and watch another video right now. As always, I'm really thankful for the support, and if you enjoyed this video, please do like it, please do subscribe to the channel as well. Once again, details of my socials and my editor Jay's socials are in the description, as well as how to support us financially if you like. For now, take care, and I'll see you all next week.